To begin with, we need to visualize the appearance of Pangea as it was during its peak, 250 million years ago. At that time, this supercontinent encompassed all areas of the continental crust, and it was surrounded on all sides by a gigantic ocean, Panthalassa, which covered the rest of the Earth's surface. During that time, an enormous variety of different life forms inhabited our planet, the appearance of which is difficult for us to imagine today. For example, this is what a Lystrosaurus looked like, a dominant herbivorous species that populated nearly the entire supercontinent. And such monsters as plesiosaurs lived in the seas and were the top predators. But let's imagine what our life would be like today if this supercontinent had not broken apart. First of all, we would have a completely different layout of countries, and our world would look something like this. The most interesting change for us would be a radical shift in climate, flora, and fauna. Siberia would likely have moved to subtropical regions, and its edges would resemble modern California. Cities like Magadan or Guatemala would have had the most favorable living conditions. There, we could encounter many different species of animals. For example, along the edges of Siberia, there most likely would have been monkeys, tigers, or tapirs, as this area would have resembled modern jungles. In central China, Russia, and in nearly all of Mongolia, we might have encountered camels, scorpions, and possibly even meerkats, as these regions would have become the most desert-like. The same fate would await almost all of Africa, Brazil, and parts of the USA, which would also be situated in the furthest areas from the ocean of the supercontinent. Such changes in climate and fauna would result from the fact that the central part of such a landmass would be very arid, and it would hardly ever rain there. The reason for this would be the distance from seas and oceans. In places like Algeria or Brazil, life would have become very difficult, and most of the population would have concentrated in coastal countries like Ukraine, Iran, Indonesia, or Romania. However, almost all of modern Europe would find itself in the most favorable living conditions, which cannot be said for large countries, the majority of which would have been uninhabitable on Pangea. Through the discovery of coal deposits, scientists have concluded that the part of the land on ancient Pangea which was closest to the equator was indeed covered with tropical rainforests. At that time, Pangea could have resembled a scene from a sci-fi movie. On the supercontinent, there were very many unusual animals, and most of them were very different from modern fauna. For example, the first dinosaurs that appeared on Pangea looked nothing like their future descendants. Most likely, they had very porous bones, and instead of scales, they were covered with feathers. The majority of the species that inhabited the Earth during the existence of Pangea became the ancestors of modern fauna. And it's possible that if the continent had not broken apart, today we would have a completely different diversity of fauna. But what would our whole world be like if Pangea had not split? In that case, we might be able to drive from anywhere in the world to England by car, since the country would be on the same landmass as everyone else. A trip to Japan would be no different from a regular train journey, and the city of Helsinki would almost be in close proximity to St. Petersburg. The most radical changes would occur in Australia and India, which would shift south, and the hot climate there today would become cold, covering those areas with snow and ice. And these are far from the only changes in the environment that would occur on our planet. For example, due to the lack of natural barriers for the spread of viruses, humanity would most likely encounter various new epidemics much more frequently. Due to the dry climate, we would also face a significant reduction in the diversity of flora and fauna. Fish would become the main source of protein for people, and the main tourist cruise would likely be a journey around the continent. One of the most significant changes in our lives would be more free movement between countries. Most trips would be undertaken by regular cars or trains, and air travel would become even faster. For example, residents of Canada could easily drive to France, England, or Germany using any land transport. A journey from China to Japan would take a couple of hours by car. The next important change would be a different political landscape, as almost everyone would have new neighbors. For instance, the United States, which previously had an ocean on both sides, would find itself neighboring Africa on the east coast. which would likely cause an earlier settlement of that country. If all countries were positioned side by side, it would become much easier for people to start a war. The transportation of soldiers, weapons, and military equipment would not be as energy-consuming and costly, making it easier for people to initiate new wars. However, perhaps a united continent would encourage people to treat their land more carefully, which could influence the number of peace agreements between countries and lead to the cessation of all wars. However, for now, these are just hypotheses. But what if I tell you that such a merging of continents is likely to happen again in the future? If we believe today's theories, the process of merging and separating continents is cyclical and occurs over a vast timescale. The theory of the emergence of a future supercontinent is based on several scientific achievements. For example, studies of the history of plate movement have shown that approximately every 550 million years, blocks of continental crust come together to form a single supercontinent. If this happens in 250 million years, the North American continent will rotate counterclockwise, and Alaska will find itself in the subtropical zone. The Mediterranean Sea will close up, and mountains comparable in height to the Himalayas will form in its place. Eurasia will continue to rotate clockwise, and the British Isles will end up near the North Pole, while Siberia will move into the subtropics. Today's scientists believe that this will ultimately result in another supercontinent, which already has a name, Pangea Ultima. The new Earth will be significantly different from the world we are used to. The surface of Pangea Ultima will be covered 90% by deserts, while giant mountain ranges will form in the northwest and southeast of the continent. It is likely that such a process will indeed occur on our Earth. However, only our distant descendants will witness it. Today's humans are accustomed to the idea that animals, plants, and even fungi are living organisms that can be hurt or killed. Yet, we are not yet ready to view the entire Earth as a single organism. But it is precisely due to the processes that constantly occur on our planet that the human race has been able to evolve, as Earth has provided us with favorable conditions for that. In any case, it is difficult for us today to accurately predict what our world would look like if Pangea continued to exist. But we cannot say that the process of forming new continents has stopped. After all, our planet continues on its path, and who knows what it will prepare for us in the future. Thank you.